Hello and welcome back to Wyoming Watch. My name is Alyssa Tolman, your local government and business reporter. For the past several weeks, community members have fought against the Cheyenne City Council's administrative inspection warrants ordinance, which would allow certain city officials to enter a property for safety or code enforcement inspections when they are unable to get the property owner's permission. On Wednesday, I sat down with Cheyenne Mayor Patrick Collins and Cheyenne resident Patricia McCoy, who has spoken at many of the council meetings to discuss this ordinance. So Mayor, I'm just going to jump right into our questions for our listeners who may not be completely up to date on this type of warrant. Can you just give an overview of what it is and what it means?
Yeah, so we have situations where we can't get compliance from the property owner to get on their property. You know, the property owners may be out of state and inherited a piece of property and they're not worried about it. It's abandoned and it becomes a problem for the community. Recently, we had a fire where an elderly gentleman was rescued from his home, but unfortunately later succumbed to those injuries. We don't know what caused that fire. And our fire department wants to do an investigation to see, was it just a tragic accident or was it something more malicious? But we can't get permission from the owner to get on the property because the owner's dead. And so we have a number of situations like that, and our chief of the fire department asked if we could get some help in being able to do some of these investigations. And so for that reason, we wrote a administrative inspection warrant ordinance to give him permission and our chief building official permission to do a limited number of inspections.
Okay. And I was going to ask that next. I know that some people might have been confused that they thought the council members brought this to council, but it was actually Andrew, our fire chief. But then I also know that the ordinance allows the chief building official and I think the city's fire marshal to apply for warrants. Did that also come from Chief Dykeshorn, or was that something that the council added?
Yeah, the fire marshal works for Chief Dykeshorn, and so those are the two people that in the fire department that would have reason to ask for a warrant. And our chief building official, when we were talking about this, said he has similar situations. If we want to go board up an abandoned building, they don't want to board a building up if they don't know who's inside it. You know, you'd hate to screw the doors and windows all shut and then find out that there's a homeless person inside. But if we can't find the owner to get permission to go in, we don't know. And so it means we really can't do anything with those abandoned buildings. So he was like, please help me with this. And so between our chief building official and our fire chief, they're the two departments that asked for this help.
Gotcha. And they're the only three that can apply for this warrant, period. That's not going to change.
Yeah, the ordinance is really clear.
Okay.
And maybe we could go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, we adopt the International Fire Code, the International Building Code, the International Property Management Code. I think there's like 10 or 12 of these codes that we adopt. They're international codes, the state adopts them, and then we have 6 months from when they adopt them that the city can adopt or should adopt them. If we don't, then the state takes over and they regulate those things. And in each of those, there's requirements that are put on the chief building official or the fire chief, inspections, follow-ups, things like that. And the codes all say that if you can't do your job, then you should go to the powers that your local municipality gives you to enforce those. Well, we passed all the codes, but we've never passed the second step of that, which is to give them the authority when you can't get compliance to be able to go in and to do the inspections that are required by the codes. And so that was, I think, really what we're trying to accomplish here.
Okay, so this was kind of a long time coming then?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, if you know Andrew Dykeshorn, our fire chief, he goes to buildings and they have a hard time getting compliance, but he's really persuasive when it comes to educating people about why they're doing things. And almost without exception, we get permission to do that. But there are times where, like I said, the owner dies. The kids live in Florida. They have no interest in this little old house that's here in Cheyenne, and it just starts to deteriorate. We get vagrants inside there. Now it becomes a real liability for the neighborhood, and we can't do anything with it. I was not elected king, I was elected mayor. I have to follow the laws, and the laws say that you can't go on a piece of personal property without permission of the owner, or you have to have a warrant to go on, and that's the process that we're trying to accomplish, and we did accomplish on Monday night.
Yes, and finally accomplished, because this ordinance was first introduced, I think it was at the December 22nd City Council meeting.
Yeah.
It's gone through so many revisions that it was even delayed once. So with all of these revisions...
You know, I would argue with you on that. I thought this went through pretty quickly. We only had one postponement, and we really only had one major revision. I wrote a substitute ordinance, and then we took 2 words out in the last time. So I thought it actually went through pretty clear and pretty quickly. I would tell you that we had a lot of testimony from a small amount of people. Honestly, I thought it went through pretty clear.
Maybe it's just from the outside looking in with all that testimony. It started to pile up a lot in my head, especially with all even though some amendments didn't pass, there were a lot of amendments proposed.
Sure there were.
Yeah. So going a little bit more in depth about that, a lot of the community members who spoke in the first couple meetings said they felt that original ordinance had a lot of vague and confusing language. Can you walk us through the revisions that you made between that ordinance and the one that you rewrote?
Yeah, maybe we should start with the Constitution. I brought with me my little handy-dandy Constitution for the United States and for Wyoming, but because we're in Wyoming, we'll read the one. But, Section 4, Article 1 of the Wyoming Constitution is the same as the Fourth Amendment, basically, with one difference in a word. And it says, security against search and seizure, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. But then has a comma and says, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by affidavit, particularly describing the place to be searched or the person or thing to be seized. And so I think when we had a lot of the people who came and talked to us, they were taking the first half of that paragraph.
Right.
They weren't reading the whole thing. And so I agree that we should not break into homes or do searches like that. The founding fathers were frustrated when the British would come in, kick doors down, right, search people's homes, haul them away without any sort of warrant or anything, and those people would just disappear. So they made sure that we had protections against that. But they also recognized government has to have a way to do their job. And they gave us a process, which is that we have to have probable cause, that we have to have an affidavit, and we have to talk specifically about what it is that we're looking to do. And that's exactly what the ordinance does. It says that we have to have a reason to go in, and we limited that to 4 things. In my work with the fire chief, we limited it to 4 things. And that is that if there's a fire and the post-fire investigation is required, but we can't get the owner, again, like the situation where the owner was dead, we can get an inspection warrant to go in and try to figure out what caused that fire and make sure that is the building safe, or do we need to condemn the building? Do we need to board it up? What do we need to do? Our fire department is required by the National Building Code to inspect all the commercial buildings, like the building we're sitting in today. We have to come on a regular basis and do that. Almost all commercial property owners understand the value of that, right? They're coming in to make sure that if there's a fire danger, that we make that situation available and known to the owner so that we don't burn your building down. But if you won't give us access to your building, it's required by law, we can get an inspection warrant to come and do that necessary inspection. But we can't come into single-family homes. So this is only for commercial properties where people would be.
Okay.
And then if you apply for a building permit, so you come to the city and you apply for a building permit to do work on either your home or your office, we are required by the codes again to inspect those to make sure that the work that you did is up to the code and is safe. Not only for the people that live there, but when you sell that property, somebody else is going to move into your home. You want to know that the work that we did was fair. You're not going to have carbon monoxide. If you do HVAC work, you're not going to have an electrical problem that could burn your home down. And so the warrant is allowed if you apply for a building permit, but then you don't let us come on the property to inspect. We can get an administrative warrant for that. And then the 4th thing that's allowed is if there's an abandoned building. So again, as we talked about earlier, these abandoned buildings are really a nuisance for the neighborhood. And if we have an abandoned building and we cannot find the owner, then we can go through. And we identify what abandoned buildings are. We tell that it's just not, my dad is in Arizona. He lives in Arizona for the winter time. His house is not abandoned. It might be empty, but it's not abandoned, right? And so we have a list of criteria that would determine what an abandoned building is. We also have a requirement on abandoned buildings that we have to go out and try to find the owner. We have to go through social media. We have to go to the place that they were at. We have to go to the last known address and send certified letters. So we just can't go and get a warrant unless we've gone through all of the efforts to identify the owner. And then, in fact, we have to go to a judge. And then we have to prove to the judge that we made efforts to find that person, why we want that warrant. And if the judge thinks that that's sufficient, then we can get a warrant. So it's not like an automatic thing that the mayor gets to sign.
Right.
There's a real process involved to protect our neighborhoods and the people who live here.
And then they have to, after that warrant is executed, they have to bring that back to the council and present. What is it exactly that they have to present?
Yeah, so within 10 days of execution of a warrant, then we have to send that warrant to the governing body so that they know, again, for that transparency, so that they make sure that we're following the legislative intent of the council.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. And then I want to go back real quick because that was something that I think, this is something I think a few people were a little bit confused about as well. The original ordinance included single-family homes, I believe, and then so this one does not at all, period.
It did not include single-family homes.
It didn't? Okay, some
No.
people were thinking it did, and so I think that was...
You have to look, I think you can look at individual paragraph in an ordinance, but you have to look at the entire ordinance.
Right.
So there might be a thing that says we can inspect properties, but earlier in the thing it says, but only commercial properties. Or you look at the code, and what does the code say? The code says that we only inspect commercial properties. And so I think it was unfair of people to read, a line or a paragraph and say that, we were doing malicious things.
Yeah.
Because really when there's a law, you have to read the entire law and understand the entire law, and they weren't doing that.
I think that got me confused at first
Yep.
too, because there were so many people were saying people are coming into our homes, and I was looking through the ordinance and I was like, I'm not completely sure, but also it was a little bit vague, that very
But if you
first
read the
one.
International Fire Code, it says that inspections can only be made on commercial properties.
Right.
It doesn't give the fire department permission to inspect single-family homes. Or if you have a building permit and we come in, the only thing we can inspect is the things that are in the building permit. When my inspectors are there, they see a life safety issue. They might say, hey, Alyssa, if you better look at that because that might burn your house down. But we're not going to do anything about that. That's not in our purview. We can only inspect the things that the building permit includes.
Gotcha.
And so I think there was just a lot of misunderstanding on people, or maybe I'd even go a little bit further. I don't know that maybe they understood, but it doesn't meet their political point when they were arguing with us.
So there are still, that leaves a few more questions in my head I think that you could answer pretty easily. There are still some people after that council meeting on Monday that were still saying this would affect their Fourth Amendment rights. So is that just the same answer you just gave? It's just flat out, it's not going to?
From my opinion, no, I don't believe so.
Gotcha.
I think the courts have really ruled on the Fourth Amendment many, many times, right? And they put limits on what we can do. I think 1967, they really started cracking down on what government can do, starting to require warrants and different things like that. And I read the Constitution, right? It does say that you're not supposed to have unreasonable searches and seizures of your property. But the second half says, but there is a process that you have to go through that is part of that Fourth Amendment. And this ordinance exactly does that. It requires us to have probable cause. It requires us to have an affidavit, a sworn affidavit, and then we have to be very specific about it. What is that we're going to look at? And then we have to go to a judge, and the judge issues that warrant. That is the Fourth Amendment. Yep.
Okay.
It's not a warrantless search. It's a warranted search.
Right.
And again, we've limited that to those four very narrow things. And so from my perspective, I think it's a good law.
Yeah, and then there was also the argument between whether a district court judge or I can't even remember exactly. Some people were saying what kind of judge is allowed to give these warrants. What happened there? Yeah,
so I called a district judge and I said, sir, if I brought you a municipal warrant, what would you do? And he goes, I'd throw it away. He goes, we don't have the authority to do enforcement of municipal ordinances. We are the appeal to a municipal ordinance, but we're not the enforcement of that. Municipal ordinances should go through the municipal court. And so our process sends it to our municipal court judge. And if there is an appeal to that, it would go to the district judge. And I think there was, people were talking about, remember it was like Section 37, that gentleman was talking about.
Yeah.
Well, again, you have to go look at that. It does talk about warrants, but it's for pharmaceuticals and drugs. It has nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
You have to read the whole thing. You can't just read one sentence. You have to read the whole thing. And it was very obvious that he was very wrong on that.
So this might be, I started working with the Tribune Eagle back in June of last year. This might be the most public comment I've seen regarding something with the city council since I started working here. Are you happy with the outreach that the council received? Are you happy with the amount of people who came and spoke out?
Yeah, I said after the meeting each time that I love when people come to our meetings and share their opinions. And hopefully they feel like they were listened to, because I like the first ordinance. I thought it did exactly what the substitute does. But listening to those folks, you can tell they maybe have a little bit of a fear of government and a lack of trust in government. And that's disappointing, but I understand. And so we went back and we rewrote that in a way that more described the limitations. They were already there because, like I say, the codes only allow for commercial, but we put it specifically in there. The original one didn't allow for no-knock warrants, but we put in there will be no no-knock warrants, and we put in the process that we would go through to notify owners. I think it's exactly what the first one is, but we wrote it in a different way to try to address those fears specifically and address them. So I hope that people feel really good that they came and they talked to us, we listened, and we made some modifications to try to make people feel more comfortable about that. So I think it was a really great process. I actually love that.
Yeah. So, and then since that ordinance was passed, have you heard anything about it since? Are people still a little bit up in arms about it, or is it pretty quiet?
Haven't heard a word.
Okay, so those were really the main questions that I had, but is there anything else you want to say about the warrants?
No, I think, Mr. Laybourne, I thought, had a really nice comment, and that is that he knows the people that are going to enforce these things. He knows our fire chief. He knows our chief building official. These are reasonable people that we work with all the time, and I loved his confidence in their ability to do this job impartially and do it the way it was supposed to be done. However, I do understand some people maybe don't share that confidence, and so we've tried really hard to write this in a way that protects and prevents people from using it in a negative way. And I think it's going to be a good thing. We have that house that has had the fire. We'll be able to get a permit now. We'll be able to go in and find out what caused that fire. We have a number of abandoned buildings now that we'll be able to go into, make sure that there's nobody in there that shouldn't be there, that there's nothing that's really dangerous in there, and then we'll be able to board them up, make them safer for the neighborhoods. So I think this is a good law and one that we needed to handle.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to explain this to me and all of our listeners.
Appreciate you.
So now I have Cheyenne resident Patricia McCoy with me. She has managed to attend pretty much all of the council meetings regarding these warrants to comment on them. So Patricia, like I said, you were there at pretty much all of the meetings and you were very vocal when these warrants were being voted on. So I just want to start. You were one of the people who, when the first draft came out, one of the people who said it was pretty vague and confusing. Can you explain what made you feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first draft that they sent out, I felt like it was intentionally vague and confusing. I think that the way that it was presented to the public, it was not explained well at all. I started researching it and going line by line, like, what does this say? What does this mean? Why do they need this? Because none of that was given to us. And the more that I looked into it and I researched it, I realized they're just saying you can apply for this warrant for any reason to go in. Now they're telling you it's for public safety. Right. We just want the abandoned buildings. But nowhere in there did it say anything about abandoned buildings and that it was limited only to abandoned buildings or buildings that had caught fire. If that's what it was for, then we needed to say that, because in Wyoming, like I've said, speaking to the council many times, we have a strong belief in our Fourth Amendment rights. We drafted our Constitution to be stronger than the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution intentionally. And then we added the Castle Doctrine to that. So we truly believe that our home is our safe place, and you don't have a right as the government to come in here for any reason without our authorization. And this would have totally bypassed that. It would have given them a key into every house for any reason. They could decide, we want to inspect Reed Avenue today, right? And your house is on there, so sorry, we're coming in and we're going to inspect everything that your home has to offer us. And it's very scary to know that the government is trying to get into buildings. If it were just for the abandoned buildings, everyone supported that. We don't like the hole that's sitting downtown. We don't like the abandoned buildings that are sitting empty and rotting away. We know those are unsafe, but not at the expense of our Fourth Amendment rights. Are we going to let you pass something that allows you to just do whatever you want, basically? So it took a lot of time. very quickly to try and do all of that and get prepared for that first meeting. I reached out to Councilwoman Michelle Aldrich because I had questions. I spoke with Councilman Mark Moody to try and ask questions as well, like, hey, can you help explain this to me? And it was great. They really did try to listen to me and answer any questions that I did have while I was researching, but it was a lot of red flags in that ordinance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So other than the fact that the language was vague and confusing, which is something that pretty much everybody said, were there any other issues specifically that you had, like rules that were in it, or if there were any? I know it was vague and confusing.
It was vague. And
yeah.
It was very vague and confusing. And it was really just in the wording. Like, I was adamant. Those two words were coming out, right? Like, the second that you have discover and determine in there, that was my hard stop. That was this is where it's unconstitutional. Little things in there like the hours with which they can come and try to request entry, how they're going to request entry. I think some of the attorneys that we have in the city did an excellent job drafting amendments for those things, and I let them do their legalese thing with those. But those two words were my hard stop. And I knew what our Constitution said, and I was going to stand by that, and I did all the way until the time they voted.
Yeah, you did. I was there. And I was going to bring that up next, the words determine and discover. Can you go a little bit more in depth about why you and others had issues with that and why you wanted it to only be, for our listeners, let me read. The section she's referring to is section 1.28.020B3, which says, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this, but not necessarily, I got the gist of it. Probable cause shall be deemed to exist if an inspection is reasonably necessary to determine, discover, or verify the condition of the property. So can you just kind of explain why you only wanted the word verify in there and go more in depth about how that played into the constitutional argument?
Absolutely. With the wording in our Article 1, Section 4 of the Wyoming Constitution, it does say that you can verify, right? It doesn't say anything about discover or determine.
Right.
You only have the right to verify something that already exists, a known infraction or issue, right? Something that has been told to you and you have to now verify it, right? So the Constitution covers that. It does not allow you to go in and discover something once you're already there. And our Wyoming Supreme Court, my apologies, they actually ruled in O'Boyle versus State and Vasquez versus State this exact same point. Because if you allow the government to discover things, they could say, your grass is too long. We're gonna inspect everything else now, and well, because your grass was too long, now we've come in and it looks like you're not up to code on your plumbing, so now you got to get your plumbing up to code. And we also noticed over here some cracking in your foundation, right? Like little things like that. Are those immediate emergency health risks to the public or safety of the neighborhood? No.
So one of the council members, and I'm pretty sure it was Michelle Aldrich, she made the motion to strike those two words, and after some discussion it was approved. Is that the outcome you expected?
It's what I hoped for.
Okay.
I really did. I really hoped that they would listen. They would strike those two words. I was so appreciative that Councilwoman Aldrich did put forth that amendment using my strike sheet to strike those two words. I actually gave her a shout out on my personal Facebook page because I was so grateful that she had done that. And I was grateful that it passed. It still allows the city to do and the fire department to do what they need to do in regards to the abandoned buildings, the buildings that catch fire, like the ones that the mayor had mentioned and spoken about during the meetings and discussions, but it still protects our rights and our privacy of our homes. So I think that is key. Are we upset that it passed at all? There are people that are upset. I've seen it on social media. I personally am okay that it passed because I understand the need that the city and the fire department had. I just was not going to let them trample our rights to do it.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wish they would have amended in it?
I wish they would have just scrapped it and started over just to focus on the abandoned buildings and those fire situations so that we didn't have to have this battle. I don't think it needed to be that. I think it could have been tossed aside and redone.
Yeah. And so how do you think these council meetings went in regard to comment and response from council members? Like, do you feel as a whole that everybody was listened to?
By some, I do. By some council members, Michelle Aldrich, Mark Moody, they did an excellent job listening. I think Jeff White really tried to understand. He asked questions. I won't mention them by name, but there were obviously some that didn't really seem like they were too interested in what we had to say. They talked down to us as if we didn't know what we were speaking about. They tried to, I don't know how to properly put it. I mean, on another issue that same night, they tried to make it clear like they knew exactly what they were talking about, and we didn't. We know what we're talking about. I may not be an attorney, right? But I do know some Latin. I do know what the attorney said when he was speaking during my turn. I do know what they're discussing. I can do really good research. I know we had attorneys speaking, and they acted like they didn't know what they were talking about. And I'm like, these people speak legalese like you do. What do you mean they don't know or understand? So it was very disheartening to see the eye rolls and the dirty looks and the disgust that was displayed. And I called it out in one of the meetings because I just felt it was unacceptable. It didn't seem like they were representing the people in those moments, in those meetings.
The big thing, you touched on this a little bit, there were some things that were said that people may have been a little bit offended by. I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, that I saw people react to was the fear of the government claim. What's your response to that?
Of course we fear the government. Everyone should fear the government. I mean, if you don't fear the government, there might be a problem. I mean, these people are elected or appointed, as some of them are, to serve us. They work for us, and they seem to forget that. Like, you are only there because we put you there. Elections are coming up in November. Are we going to put the same people there again? I don't think so. I really, truly don't. Some of them, sure, if they're up for election, we would happily do it. Others, absolutely not. I think they're going to have a fight on their hands this November because you have to remember who you work for. Of course we fear you. We're supposed to fear you. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Thomas Jefferson said that. And the reason it's my favorite quote is exactly what he said. There's tyranny, right? When we fear the government like we do now, we're going to fight back. And we're going to say, no, you can't do this, just like we did at this city council meeting. You stepped over your bounds too far, and we're going to push you back now. But when they fear us, that's when we have liberty, because they remember they work for us. They serve us. We are not peons or peasants beneath them that they can look down upon as if they are kings or rulers. They work for the people, and we, the people, don't like when our rights start to get trampled.
Yeah. But you were fine with the ordinance being passed.
I was okay with it. Once they passed the amendments through the committee meeting, and those got added in, and then they struck those two words. Once they struck those two words, I was fine. I was not going to argue with them anymore, and I would be okay with them passing it. Everyone says I'm just one person. My vote doesn't matter. I can't make a difference. But I'm just one person. And I showed up, and I refused to give up with just a few other people, and we made those changes, and we got it into something that's constitutional. So anyone can make a difference.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss with me, and I figure I'll see you again at future council meetings because I'm at all of them, and I hope to see you at all of them.
I hope to be at most of them.
And now here's our arts and entertainment reporter, Taylor Staples, to talk about this week's upcoming events.
This list doesn't include the list of ongoing events or exhibits in the area, only day-by-day specific events. On Friday, February 13th, there's a living room conversation session surrounding self-compassion from noon to 1 p.m. at the library in the Sunflower Room. Then there's the chocolate-themed Second Friday Art Walk tonight from 5 to 8 p.m. at various locations downtown, including Westward, which will have an opening reception for a brand new exhibit called Cheyenne Unfixed. Also, Cheyenne Little Theater Players' production of Almost Maine premieres tonight at the Mary Godfrey Playhouse with a show at 7 p.m. Shows will also take place tomorrow at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 2 p.m. And to top off the night, Nappy Roots is coming to perform at the Cheyenne Civic Center at 7:30 p.m. in tandem with Cheyenne Presents Thanks for the Memories series. On Saturday, February 14th, Valentine's Day kicks off with card making at the Burns Branch Library from 9 a.m. to noon, and there's also a farmers market at the Frontier Mall from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Today is also the first day of Winter Nights, a jousting event presented by Visit Cheyenne at the Event Center at Archer. This takes place both today and tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. and going all through the evening. Then, at the Early Literacy Center in the library, there will be a story time about the Black Hair Experience given by Monica Jennings Woodard from 10:15 to 11 a.m. And later, the Cheyenne Mineral and Gem Society is hosting a silent auction from noon to 3 p.m. at the IBEW 415 Union Hall at 810 Fremont Avenue. On Sunday, February 15th, the Cheyenne Civic Center is once again hosting Mania, the ABBA tribute, at 7:30 p.m. On Tuesday, February 17th, the Laramie County Library is hosting another Senior Planet event in the Cottonwood Room regarding AI tech tools from 10 to 11:15 a.m., and the Burns Branch Library is hosting a book club discussion around Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Later, the Cheyenne Audubon Society is hosting a program called Forever Chemicals, a public lecture on how chemicals like PFAS are contaminating America. This program will be in the Laramie County Library's Sunflower Room at 6 p.m. On Wednesday, February 18th, the library is hosting chair yoga and poetry in the Cottonwood Room from 2:30 to 3:20 p.m., as well as a teen jewelry making class from 4 to 6 p.m. in the Sage Room. Then, the Cheyenne Creativity Center has an open studio session at their new location at 500 West 15th Street from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And finally, on Thursday, February 19th, the library has a sit, stay, and read to a therapy dog session from 4 to 5 p.m. in the Early Literacy Center, as well as a teen writing club from 4 to 5 p.m. in the Windflower Room. There's also a beginner vegetable garden session from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. for adults in the Cottonwood Room. Also, the Cheyenne Frontier Days Old West Museum is hosting another Discover and Discuss event regarding oral histories of Union Pacific employees from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Tonight is also Pay What You Can night for Almost Maine at the Mary Godfrey Playhouse again at 7 p.m. The show will be playing the rest of next weekend as well. For a full list of events, go to wyomingnews.com/calendar.
And finally, here's a recap of some of our top stories from this past week. Representative Jeremy Haroldson, a Wheatland Republican, urged his House colleagues Tuesday to change a law expanding concealed carry laws and other gun rights in Wyoming. House Bill 96 is his proposal to lower the legal age for acquiring a concealed carry permit from 21 to 18. Other proposals included authorizing individuals to carry concealed weapons without a permit on any public, college, or university campus. He also proposed to add a misdemeanor to the already existing House Bill 98 regarding the banning of red flag gun laws, and Haroldson's House Bill 97, which would bar the disclosure or use of information related to firearms and ammunition sales under certain circumstances. Next, in Wyoming, there is currently no formal process to recall municipal mayors and council members. A proposed law is looking to change that. House Bill 22, sponsored by Representative Scott Heiner, R. Green River, received an 8-1 committee vote Wednesday to advance after a lengthy discussion centered on how to balance voter accountability with the administrative complexities of the Wyoming election code. Third, the Cheyenne City Council chamber was almost completely packed Monday night with members of the community who came to voice their support of a local urban farm, Y Fresh Farm and Farm Stand, which is among the last group of county pockets to be annexed into the city. Farm officials have taken to social media to rally support and attempt to stop the annexation. And lastly, a long-idle downtown corner may soon see new life after a developer secured more than $6 million in state and federal housing funds to transform the historic Heinz building and the adjacent Hole into a 69-unit affordable housing development. According to a news release sent by the Wyoming Community Development Authority on Tuesday, the city has been awarded over $6 million for the historic Heinz lofts and the reserves at the Hole, which the release states are a 69-unit mixed new construction and acquisition rehabilitation housing community in the Heinz and the Hole. Thank you again for tuning in to Wyoming Watch, and we'll see you again next week.